Hello, friends. Welcome back to your new community. Today, we're going to spend some time in Jesus's teaching on children and just his heart for them. If you missed Russ's sermon this past Sunday, it was a good one on just unpacking this passage. You can catch it online on our website. But he gave a wonderful message called Kingdom Values, Child's Play. And I appreciated how Russ first brought out just some present day statistics to just bring children to life. Just a sort of a global picture of how children, on one hand, are vulnerable. First, he gave the statistic that 1 in 4 children, they're not even registered. They, in some sense, don't exist. He brought out the statistic that 3 billion people around the world don't have hand washing facilities with water and soap at home. And of those 3 billion, obviously a good number of them are children. And Russ shared this map where the darker blue corresponded to a higher percentage of children who don't have access to just everyday necessities and hygiene and so forth, like the hand washing. And so you can see where in the world there's a higher percentage of children who are not well taken care of right now. And so Russ, he was asking or trying to draw out kingdom values. And so just to add my listening of the sermon to Russ's sermon, I think one value that Russ was trying to draw out, one kingdom value, the first one, is that Jesus, he esteems literal children and their qualities. And so again, just to think back on some of the statistics that Russ shared, do we have a heart for literal children in this day and age? Be it our own flesh and blood children, or thinking of children, even perhaps orphans across the world, those who are in just difficult, helpless situations. Do we have a conscience for that? So as we think about this kingdom value, it's interesting to see that Jesus, he cares about literal children. And what I love about Jesus is he moves very like a figure skater, so smoothly between the literal, the concrete, and the abstract, the transcendental, the heavenly. And certainly Jesus cares about concrete people and things and situations on this earth, even as he points us to eternal matters and realities. So we see Jesus esteeming literal children here and their qualities. So here are some questions to follow up on this first kingdom value. What are the qualities of children that we should seek to emulate in our faith life? So take some time celebrating children and identifying how certain qualities of children translate well to our faith life. As a follow-up, look in the spiritual mirror. By God's grace, what qualities do you see in your own faith? And so I want you to just, hopefully you can find the humility to just celebrate how you've experienced God's grace to help you be childlike, and just talk about that, celebrate God's grace that way. But also, by God's grace, what qualities do you need the Spirit's and church's help to grow in? How can we be an encouragement to you? Perhaps, and I hope you feel safe enough in your new community that you can share just ways that you know that you need to continue to grow and mature. Well, moving on, Russ brought out and pointed our attention to the fact that children were brought to Jesus. Russ just unpacked the reality. Probably was it was a lot of moms that brought these children, but nevertheless, it just says here generally that the children were brought to him that he might lay his hands on them and pray. And so here is a bit of an allegorical kingdom value for us, both concrete and allegorical. And so the second kingdom value that I heard in Russ's sermon was that Jesus seeks spiritual children. we see these people taking initiative to connect the children to Jesus. And we can understand that literally, concretely in our own lives. So let me just point us to some questions. Proactively sharing our faith and making disciples, they're unnatural disciplines. They're Christian disciplines that we need to intentionally pursue. Are you bringing children to Christ these days? Are you doing your part, both concretely and literally, flesh and blood children, or perhaps your grandchildren, your nephews, nieces, or perhaps children of close family friends? Are you doing your part to connect these literal children to Christ? But also allegorically and spiritually, are we doing our part to continue to reach out to people who don't know Christ and trying to point them to Jesus? So just to read these questions here, just repeating thoughts I've already just mentioned. Parents, relatives, are you deliberately present in the lives of the literal children in your life, taking opportunity to rub Christ off onto them through conversations and prayer? Do you need encouragement in your ongoing Christian witness? Who are you praying for? How can we encourage you in your witness? Well, moving on, Russ also pointed us and got us to observe and notice that the disciples, Jesus' disciples, they rebuked the people that were bringing these children to Jesus. And Russ, he reminded us of an idea, a syndrome, and C.S. Lewis put it, he called it the inner ring syndrome. And basically, to recap, socially, emotionally, in our culture, there are all these inner rings, little people groups that are exclusive, and we find ourselves at some point in our lives looking from the outside in, and we want to be a part of that inner ring, and so we work hard to gain whatever status, financially, socially, vocationally, etc., to try to enter that ring. And then, once we do somehow get accepted to that ring, we find ourselves curiously opposed to other people entering that ring, even as much as we fought so hard to enter that ring. And C.S. Lewis goes on to say in that essay about the inner ring that once you get into that inner ring, you realize there are more inner rings within the inner rings. It's never ending. And so kingdom value number 3 is that the whole point of this, the disciples had their own inner ring set up. They weren't going to let the children into the inner ring of Christ. And as well, I think Matthew wants us to see that the disciples still hadn't learned Christ's treasuring of children. They hadn't gotten it because at least once before, my memory is not serving me well right now, but it might have been even twice before in Matthew's gospel, Jesus speaks of just the value, the just looking to children as an example of faith and the kind of faith that Christ wants his followers to have. So kingdom value number 3, until Christ returns, Christ followers are maturing children no matter their physical age. I think that's one thing that we're to learn from the disciples' negative example of rebuking the people for bringing children, that they still didn't get the lesson and they had more to learn. Similarly, we need to continually grow and certainly reaching out to people in the name of Christ and wanting to see as many come into Christ's circle is something that we need to grow into. And then Jesus, he concludes, let the little children come to me and do not hinder them, for to such belongs the kingdom of heaven. And I think from this passage, a kingdom value that we can glean is that entering the kingdom of heaven requires a childlike heart. So I leave with you the questions that Russ asked at the end of his sermon. To what extent are we willing to become like children to enter the kingdom of heaven? What part of your adult life is preventing you from coming to Jesus? And I appreciated Russ sharing honestly one example from his life. Are there any inner circles which I will to be a part of that you almost make idolatrous, and perhaps without even you realizing it, you are creating a very exclusive heart and not reaching out to others as Christ would want us to. Well, I hope that's helpful for you to have a meaningful discussion. So God bless, and I'm thinking of you, and I've prayed for your time together this week. Bye.